back to another edition of the I Prefer the 80s and 90s Sports podcast where I talk about why I, Richard Harris Jr., prefer the sports of the 80s and 90s to today. We are flying along, gone beyond the 100 show mark. Very pleased that I keep doing this on a daily basis. It gives me mental clarity that I still do this, as my world is just trash. I don't wish it upon anyone, ladies and gentlemen, but I digress. As the NBA is about to start tomorrow, and normally I am excited for basketball because, see, in the 80s and 90s, my team was good. And today they are improving. They've made the playoffs. But the New York Knickerbockers of the 80s and 90s were way better than they are today. And so the excitement for a new season is there, but it's not the same as it once was in the 80s and 90s. For starters, the new NBA, in my opinion, is not very palatable because of a lot of reasons. Number one reason, players control the league. Now you say, wait a second, Michael Jordan didn't control the league? No, Michael Jordan didn't control the league. Magic Johnson didn't control the league? No, Magic Johnson didn't control the league. Larry Bird didn't control the league? No, Larry Bird did not control the league. Today, the league is controlled by the players. And so many people around this country love it. They love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. They love this new sports world, this new era of empowerment of athletes. And in my mind, I think it's trash. And I love the fact that the teams that still follow the basic principles and tenets of the 80s and 90s are the teams that still win the championships, and the teams that don't, just news headline. There was a football game this year in college football where the head football coach at the University of Oregon said, that team is about clicks and we are about wins. And they beat the snot out of that team. It was about clicks. And the NBA seems to be that. The NBA wants to be in control of social media instead of winning on the floor. Period. The players think that they are so powerful, and this new NBA has allowed them to be, that they are bigger than the sport. Every year over the last, 4 or 5 years, there's been a story about something to do with a disgruntled player who's playing on a team that didn't win a championship. And he dominates the conversations for weeks, for months. And it's annoying. Now, I'm not saying that players weren't disgruntled in the 80s and 90s, that players didn't want to call their own shots in the 80s and 90s, and for some reason it's being allowed to happen. There isn't. In fact, saying for some reason is bad to say. David Stern, the commissioner of the NBA in the 80s and 90s, wouldn't tolerate any of this. And I find it hilarious every time I hear stories about how David Stern would talk to the players. When the players would come into his office and they had a disciplinary problem or there was an issue or conversation, David Stern didn't sit there like a little punk and let the players agent or manager go in there and put their foot down and say X, Y, and Z. No, David Stern gave him back to him. You cursed at him, he cursed at you. You yelled at him, he yelled louder than you. And it wasn't like he was trying to scare people. He was like a little Napoleon, which might be an insult to him, but he didn't care. He was in control of the league, and he let everybody know that he was the boss. Adam Silver, not so much. Adam Silver, as the boss of the league, wants to be the players' friend, wants to hear the players talk, wants to hear all sides of all the players' arguments. And look at the league that he has created. He has created a league where he now has to put rules in effect to make the players play. Because players in their contracts get bonuses for achievements. And so when the player is not reaching those bonuses and still getting paid a lot of money, some players don't care. I'm still getting paid $20 million. Who cares? Wouldn't you? I mean, if you made $20 million one season, that's life-changing money. And then in the second season, you're about to make another $20 million, and there's incentives for you to make $25 million. Most people would want to make the $25 million, but there's also a population of people who say, "I'm content with the 20. I don't need to lead the league in rebounding. I don't need to lead the league in scoring. I don't need to win MVP. I don't need to be anything but content because I made 20 last year and I'll make another 20 this year and I'll make another 20 next year." And maybe as I mature, I'll say, you know what? I should have grabbed that rebound. I should have gotten that steal because it would have made me more money. But the players today don't care. And so they've let the league go. In fact, it's kind of like a malaise attitude. It's kind of totally an LA, old school attitude in the respect that growing up in the East Coast, we used to always think that people out here, and it's true, the mentality out here is don't worry, be happy. And they'll knock you out if they have to knock you out, but don't worry, it's all good. And so it's even to the point where it's like, well, look, I keep bringing this up all the time when I talk about tennis, but I'll never forget watching that interview with Chanda Rubin and James Blake were talking about how hard it is to win a tournament after you've won a tournament. And the next week you got to jump on a plane and play in another tournament, and your first round match could be on that Monday or could be on that Tuesday. And you're not there. And they basically said, go for it, Roger. Go for it, Novak. Go for it, Rafa. Go for it, Andy. Because they're like, we got our one. And that's kind of the attitude of the basketball player. Hey, listen, the league wants to be all about LeBron. Be all about LeBron. Go for it. It's your league, brother. It's your league, Steph. There's no hunger. And so what do? What they do now is they all join teams. They all team up together and try to get that one ring. In this offseason, there's been some incredibly crazy trades to try to make things happen. I mean, for Bradley Beal to be playing with Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, where's the point guard? Is there a point guard? I haven't seen any of their preseason games. For Chris Paul to join Golden State, for the Celtics to get rid of Smart and add Porzingis, and of course, the saga right now, James Harden. Nobody knows if he's going to come back to play. He just decided, I ain't practicing, I'm not going back. Last year, the saga was Ben Simmons. And what's annoying is NBA Today is on TV every day talking about the NBA. Talking about how excited everyone is to see Victor Wembanyama. The 7'4", 20-year-old from France. Doing things that no one thought a 7'4" guy could do. And I'm not going to disrespect Victor. I bought my ticket. I'm going next Sunday night to see the Clippers play the Spurs, just to see old Vicky Vic. And I'm not going to disrespect. I'm going to open my eyes and I'm going to watch everything that I can watch while I can. But here's the difference between the 80s and 90s excitement and today. The 80s and 90s excitement, first of all, there wasn't much excitement because it wasn't on TV all the time. It didn't stop being tape delayed until the 80s. And then it was on TV and it was exciting, but it was only showing the Celtics and the Lakers and not really all the teams. And it started showing all the teams. But at the end of the day, we all knew what it was going to come down to. We all knew that it was going to come down to the Celtics, the Sixers, the Lakers. The West was weird. The West was Magic and everybody else. There wasn't a good team in the West. Houston was good in the West because they drafted, key phrase, drafted Akeem Olajuwon and Ralph Sampson. Then the Spurs drafted David Robinson and Tim Duncan. They didn't join super teams to try to win championships. And I also find it funny, and I'm not trying to disrespect people of today's game, but in the 80s and 90s, everybody had defined roles. So we never knew whether or not a certain player could shoot three-point shots who was 7 feet tall, who was 6'10", 6'11", until the influx of the European players came into the league. Most 7-footers, most 6'11" guys play with their back to the basket because it's easier to make a shot closer to the basket than it is far away. And that's what made basketball exciting. The dunk, not the three. The dunk made the game watchable. Instead of watching players from every which way but loose shoot 25-foot shots, shoot from distances that made you scratch your head and say, yes, 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 no, no, no. And I don't understand how it all got phased out. And it got all phased out because the players decided that their personal safety, their personal health, their personal mental well being was more important than the game. And it's true. It's kind of like in baseball when the home run derby starts and it happens and a player wins the home run derby and the player is lauded and excited and everyone is going nuts. But then the player comes back to his team, he can't hit no more because he's been swinging for the home run fences that he's lost his swing. The slam dunk contest, people stopped doing it because they started getting hurt. Vince Carter was like, my knee's starting to hurt a little bit. I don't want to hear that. My knee hurts. I don't want to do it. LeBron James never did slam dunk contest. That was the staple of the 80s and 90s. Dominique versus Mike. Dr. J. Kenny Smith, who I think should have won that one year. Every young player, Kobe did it, did the slam dunk contest. J.R. Ryder gave you a name for a little bit. Kenny Skywalker. But then again, David Stern had control of this league. And when David Stern spoke, people listened. But of course, today is different because if a white man's telling a black man to do something, the black man says this is not slavery. The slave mentality is over. The slave owner to slave relationship is over. But don't you think it's fascinating that the two most influential people of the 80s and 90s are still extremely relevant today? I mean, Michael and Magic give credibility to everything. Magic tried to help the Lakers and it didn't work because the way Magic Johnson sees the game ain't the way it's played no more. I mean, he was instrumental in getting LeBron there, but he had enough. This team stunk. He didn't want to be a part of it. Michael Jordan owned the Charlotte franchise, owned the Washington franchise, and they stunk all the years. And people were like, how is it that the greatest basketball players of previous eras can't, well, not all of them, but how is it that the greatest basketball players of the previous era can't put together winning teams except for Larry Bird? You know what the difference between Michael, Magic, and Larry is Michael and Magic couldn't explain, well, how they won, how to win, number one. And number two, and most importantly, and this is probably not a good thing to say out loud, the players that Michael and Magic had to deal with, as in comparison to the players that Larry Joe Bird got to deal with. Larry Joe Bird got to deal with players who were more mature, who were players that he actually competed against, and he brought in a coach after he left that the players related to because he was practically one of them. Magic couldn't understand people having cell phones at practice and people coming late to practice and saying practice starts at 10 and hoping people will show up at 9:30 and people would show up at 10. Michael had to deal with children. Michael had to deal with players who were not ready for their fame, for their close-ups. Simple as that. The reason why other coaches who were former players are succeeding. Steve Kerr. Why Steve Kerr succeeding? Steve Kerr came into a Golden State Warriors situation with an already experienced team. Not experienced in the sense of being in the league for a bunch of years. Mark Jackson got them when they were babies, and Steve Kerr came in and had instant credibility because Steve Kerr played with Michael Jordan, and so the players immediately gave him respect. Steve Kerr pulled players aside and said, "You coming off the bench this year, and you gonna like it." And Andre Iguodala told him to his face that he didn't really like it, and if it didn't work, he would actually kick Steve Kerr's butt, is what he said supposedly. But it worked, and they got a ring. And Andre Iguodala got MVP of the finals because he shut LeBron down. But if you look at the coaches today, Tyronn Lue. Lue was a former player, a champion, played with Kobe, coached LeBron. So he goes into situations with credibility that other coaches don't. But other coaches get respect because they're actually real, true coaches. Mike Malone at Denver, he never played in the NBA. His dad was a coach, may he rest in peace, for many years, assistant coach in the league. He goes to Denver and he gets automatic respect because he's an actual physical coach. He knows X's and O's. And also a veteran team. But some of these coaches today, they got to babysit. They got to babysit little kids first before they get to where they want to get. Victor going to the Spurs is interesting because Pop's on his basically last legs. Still the smartest coach in the history of basketball. You got David Robinson and Tim Duncan on your team. Sean Elliott. Do I want to stay in the front office or do I want to coach that? I think I can coach that. And he did. And what, 5 championships later? Anyway, NBA starts tomorrow. It's going to be a very, very odd season because when you watch basketball, like you watch every sport today, you watch for 2 things. You watch to see how teams are going to mesh, and you watch to see if teams are going to get hurt. Isn't that funny? You watch the Clippers, who I watch a lot out here, and you're watching and hoping and praying that they stay healthy, that they get through a game without injury. You watch the Lakers, it's the same thing. You don't watch the game. You watch to see if Anthony Davis is going to be able to handle being fouled, or if LeBron's going to pull a hamstring, and or if LeBron is going to have the ball in his hands with 3 seconds to go and pass it instead of shooting it. This year's got a lot of crazy stuff. Ja Morant situation. How is Memphis going to deal with him? He doesn't need therapy, folks. He just needs to be kept away from guns. How is Bradley Beal and Kevin Durant and Devin Booker going to work together without a point guard who can actually really play the position consistently and very well, who is proven? How are the Knicks going to respond after what happened at the end of last season, losing to Miami? Are they going to take the regular season serious? Are they going to do like they do the last couple of years, where they basically want to make sure they get in and then start to wear people out? And here's what's so sick and sad about everything that I've said. Did you notice what I missed? This is the new NBA, ladies and gentlemen. I just mentioned 5, 6 topics. And did I even bring up the NBA defending champion Nuggets once? Other than talking about how their coach is a real coach? That's the new NBA. That's the point of my blog today. The old NBA, it was about the championship teams. It was about the Pistons. It was about the Lakers, the Celtics, the Bulls, the 76ers. That's all you talked about. Today's NBA, you talk about Ronnie, Bobby, Ricky, and Mike. And I'm not talking about New Edition. I'm talking about every different team has something. Dame Lillard going to Milwaukee. Giannis and Dame, are they going to be able to coexist? You talk about Philadelphia. Is James Harden coming back? Or is it really just going to be Embiid and Maxey? Can they take Philly to the top? You talk about Ice Tray. The Atlanta Hawks. Is he real? Can he really play? You talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder with Chet Holmgren and SGA. Probably the best player that nobody knows about. And those who do love his game. You talk about all of those things. Tatum, is he ready to take over the mantle as the best player in the league? Or is it still Giannis's league? All those things I just said. And you go, oh, by the way, the Denver Nuggets won the title last year with Jokic, who is a generational player who would play extremely well in the 80s and 90s, in the 60s and the 70s because of his ability to pass, defend, rebound. That's today. In the 80s and 90s, you talked about Mike, talked about Larry, talked about Magic, Isaiah, Bernard King, Julius Erving. Now, Bernard King doesn't win championships, but he was talked about a lot because he was one of the best players of the era, and then he got hurt. But those stories wouldn't be the story. He wouldn't be the story. The champions, to the victor goes the spoil. Not today. It's about Scoop playing in Portland. It's about Sacramento Kings. It's about 85 different things before you get to the champions. I've watched so many commercials about the basketball season this year, and I've only seen one with Jamal Murray in it, and I've once seen one with Jokic. I haven't seen one with Jokic in it. He's the king. All they keep talking about is how LeBron wants to prove Malone wrong. LeBron supposedly sent me a tweet where he came down court and dunked. Sent it to me, sent to my Twitter page. I don't care about you can dunk. Still ain't better than Mike. Still ain't better than Kobe or Larry or Magic. I prefer the 80s and 90s sports basketball because it was better. And I hope this season is a good one. I hope my team stays healthy. I hope I can enjoy it. I'm Richard Harris.